Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals here from the Santa Monica studios. It's major season, so the heavy hitters are all here and accounted for. Joined now again by Tennis Channel's outstanding journalist, works for 60 Minutes, executive editor for SI, has been there for, I think, over 25 years now. So don't want to date yourself a little too much, but Jon Wertheim back again on the show.
Facts are accurate. Wow. Hearing that is depressing. But no, good to be here. How are you?
I want to start with something light because you piqued a lot of interest with Twitter, and I noticed your avatar is the movie Breaking Away. Oh, man. And you had the refund scene retweeted the other day. So it's hard to dig up info on you. I know you kind of keep that the way you like it, but you know, back in my heyday of being a sports movie junkie, Breaking Away, you know, as someone that studied the classics, was high on that list. So got to give you dap. I know the Indiana roots are strong there.
Did not have Breaking Away in my bingo card of topics, but I will have you know that the filmmakers, this was filmed in my hometown of Bloomington, Indiana, and the filmmakers said for everyone in the stands, they would make a contribution to the university. So I was in the stands for Dave Stoller's heroic race at the 81 Little 500.
I don't think I'm being bold by saying it's the best cycling movie ever. Yeah, it's just
best cycling movie. Yeah, best.
I don't think I'm being bold saying it's the best cycling movie ever. Like, you just can't beat it, and it's
total
kind of
sleeper. I'll tell you something else. It really holds up. It's 40 years ago. Breaking Away for all the younger set out there. It really holds up. Great film.
I'm still itching for a tennis movie that's tennis driven like that. That's not like a historical piece that captures the action. But no, it was good. I had to mention that as we get into the Australian Open. The more things do change, and they are, which we'll get to, but the more things are staying the same. We have to start with the men's semifinals tonight. Novak Djokovic back into the semis, looking like a pretty good bet to make the final and then hoist the trophy. You know, he's gone through De Minaur and Rublev now. It's, I think, 18 straight top 10 victories on the continent of Australia. And I just have to ask you, as someone that's been around the game for so long in his career through its entirety, the question is just simple. It's like, how is it possible this guy continues to widen the gap between him and the field at age 35?
I've never seen anything like it. I would even go beyond tennis. I mean, he is playing as well as ever. And again, you timestamp this. So I'm basing this on the last six, 7 sets he's played. I don't know if he's ever played better. Some of that's statistical. Some of that's the eye test. I mean, he's 35 years old. I think, look, he does an extraordinary job keeping himself in shape. He's mastered the mental side of tennis. The court surface is to his liking. The distraction of last year seems to be, there's a lot breaking right. But just from a precise tennis standpoint, the idea that he is going to be 36 years old in a few months and is not only not declining, but I would say, he just, he beat the number 5 player in the world like he was a junior the other day. It's extraordinary, and I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like it. We've seen players, as they've gotten on, play a great match. So Serena had a U.S. Open semi-match in 2019 when she looked untouchable. But then she sort of reverted to form in the final. It would be, I cannot see I don't know, can you? I can't see a scenario in which Djokovic doesn't win this event.
I was thinking that we can kind of get to this, that Tsitsipas has given him tighter matches, and it's a tall task, but it's maybe not an impossible task, which you could say for some of the other guys. What strikes me as a fan of all sports is that it's the cliche of athletes get older, they get smarter, but they diminish their skill. So they make up with it with their mind, and they still can perform, but they're losing some of their physical gifts. He's like the one guy, and maybe it is outside of tennis and all sports, where he's gaining with his mind, but the gifts don't seem to be diminishing. So he's actually getting another, superpower.
Yeah, usually there's this trade-off.
Yeah.
You have sort of experience for the spring of youth. Yeah. And Andy Roddick said, my arm got, I didn't have the live arm at 30 that I had at 20, but I did have a head. With him, and we can talk about why, is this the fact that he's made, whatever it is, $165 million in prize money alone, which has enabled him to invest in biomechanics? Is it the fact that he's had these breaks? Even last season, on account of COVID protocol, he got to take a lot of time off. We can sort of ask why, but I think, physically, you don't see an athlete. He won this thing for the first time, what was it, 15 years ago?
Yeah, 2008. He to get these breaks too, and you can go to Federer and Serena, you have to be performing to keep your ranking up. So the fact that he's going to be number 1 in the world if he wins this thing and is able to take time off is just startling. I don't know that, and I know he said all the right things in terms of this is a new year, last year's in the past. It's not what I would call a vengeance tour or a animosity tour, but the added motivation might have been something that, it was just something to file away, and not like the field wants to see him more motivated, but you got to think that that's driving him a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's, as we say this, Twitter and the chatter is all about his father, and I don't know if you want to get into that. So we do have a bit of a wrinkle, but yeah, up until this incident with his father, I thought he'd handled it really well, where his tennis had been spectacular. Mm-hmm. He was very down the middle and sort of had this charm offensive, but there were a couple of little gives, a couple of little tells that, he's still pissed off about last year, and it's motivating. And we saw with Alex de Minaur how some of the remarks he made a year ago stuck in Novak's craw, and it's been this really nice balance of, on the one hand, I'm not going to seem like a guy with a grudge, and I'm not angry, and I love Australia, and I'm happy with the fan support, but he remembers, and sort of he's really sort of parsed that, I think, quite well up until now.
And just quickly, because you mentioned it, the stuff with Djokovic's father, I'm with you in the sense that I don't want to penalize the player for something a relative did without knowing more of this stuff. I know that it's not good optics at the very least.
Good optics. And it's sort of, to me, it's kind of the real sort of, if someone's, people on the outside, casual fans, they all think Novak is this villain and this professional wrestling heel. And I sort of have to say, no, not a bad guy. In fact, probably a good guy. Yeah. There is just a level of sloppiness with optics that is so at odds with this tennis, with it so precise, but also, realistically, if people say, well, it's not a story. And I'm thinking, you know what, if Richard Williams, if Earl Woods, if Federer's parents, if they were posing next to protesters wearing band apparel, talking about an illegal war, you'd kind of be expected to ask the player about that. And where do you stand? And it's just another sort of example of, again, I don't think Novak's nefarious. I don't think he's the pro wrestling heel that the guy on the street does, but you're also like, can't you tidy things up so this doesn't happen? Yeah,
very, very unfortunate to say the least. We can leave it there. The last thing with Novak, and it's the only minor thing, is it kind of opened the discussion of the old injury debate, where he says he's hurt, and it looked like he was hurt early in the tournament. He's gotten some minor flack for how hurt really was this guy if he's dominating the field. But I think there is that middle ground, like you talked about on TC Live and beyond, that it's you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? You're either disingenuous or you're faking an injury.
And also, it's an injury, which is not something that athletes necessarily have, they don't know a lot of times. We saw it with Taylor Fritz in Break Points, a great example. It's not even like, here's my political stance or here's, a lot of times athletes I've discovered, they genuinely don't know how their body's going to react, and something they don't think is particularly serious. Nick Kyrgios played an exhibition on the eve of the tournament and then revealed he needed knee surgery. But yeah, you're right. I think if athletes don't say anything and they high road it and I'm fine, and then you find out they're not. Roger Federer very rarely talked about his injuries, but then later it's like, well,
Rafa's similar too.
Yeah, exactly. And the flip side is if athletes are honest and say, I've got a twinge in my hamstring, everyone says, oh, you're a drama queen. I think we all ought to wide berth.
Yeah, and it could, you run the risk of it sounding like a built-in excuse. And I think, we could see that he was a little compromised. He's moving fine now. It's great. He plays Tommy Paul in the semifinal. What a run by the American. Gets to his first major semifinal, kind of leading the charge on what the Americans did down under. But Tommy Paul's story is so, I will say it, inspiring, because this was a guy who had all these gifts, junior Roland Garros champion, struggled openly with his maturity, with his effort, with his willing to work, got right, still mid-20s, found his game, found his attitude, and it's just great to see that hard work can pay off in such a grueling sport.
He is such a nice player, such a good athlete, and I think he's been I think now it's an open secret, but there was an issue with the U.S. Open and showing up for a doubles match, not in position to play doubles, and that, I think it was embarrassing. It also sort of put him on the outs with the USTA for a while, and he's put that all behind him, and he's very upfront and said, look, I've matured and evolved, and I'm in a different place now than I was when I was a junior, and he came up with with Francis and with Taylor Fritz and with Riley Opelka, and he wasn't 7 feet tall, and he didn't have Francis's backstory, and he didn't have Taylor Fritz's sort of rise into the top 10, but he's really made his mark as a tennis player, and this is a big result for him. This match against Novak will be a big barometer, but no, I mean, Tommy Paul is a very nice tennis player, and it's only going to get better.
He beat different types of players, too. He answered different tests. RBA is out there a while. Jensen Brooksby, there's nobody in tennis like that guy. So to keep going, and the work he's done with Brad Stein, they've been pretty open about the fact that, Stein working with Jim Courier has been around champions before. I think it's another good motion for another good point to reinforce the stability factor. Tiafoe, Fritz, and now Tommy Paul, stable camps, stable voices, taking the long approach. Rome wasn't built in a day as much as we'd want it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point that Francis and Wayne Ferreira have had a nice run, and Taylor with down here in Southern California with Paul Annacone. And, it varies player to player. Some players need fresh voices, and some players need to shake things up. But if you look at, even Roger, Rafa, Novak, they did not cycle coaches in and out. And the fact that these players, these young Americans, have actually had long-standing relationships, I think is a really good sign.
Do you think this American, surge, reinvigoration, however we want to call it, there's 3 quarterfinalists, there's a ton of players that made moves, there's going to be 10 players in the top 50 when the new rankings come out. Does this feel like a moment, having been around the game, been around the ups and downs, a lot of downs of American men's tennis?
So, I think if you're inside tennis, like you are, and you know how relentlessly global this sport is, and you know that every country has a federation that's trying to find champions, and 10 players in the top 50 for a global sport is really an achievement. I know some of them had more connection to the USTA than others, and some of them had more funding, and they arrived at different ways. Only one of them, John Isner, is over 30. The question to me is sort of the casual fan I deal with, or my wife, is there a major champion in
That's
there?
It, yeah.
And what would you rather have? One Alcaraz? And I don't know the answer. It's a good sort of thought. It's a good barroom conversation. One Alcaraz or 10 guys in the top 50?
You have more darts to throw at the board in theory, but this is where it's best of 5. So the other theory is, it's going to even out over the consistency of a best of 5 match to actually win a major.
Right.
I love the depth of the game. I think it was Riley Opelka that kind of foreshadowed this. We've got depth, the general public doesn't know, but we don't necessarily have the world beaters. Maybe they do, and maybe some of these young players, whether it's the Sebi Cordas or the Ben Sheltons coming up, it's going to take a lot of development. But Alcaraz is an outlier, and it's just a special talent.
But what would you take? Kenin is the last American major. What would you take? Korda putting together 7 amazing sets of tennis and winning a major, or it's sort of like balancing a portfolio. Yeah. Would you rather have one unicorn stock or a solid growth side? I just don't know if we see this in the ESPN broadcast. I see it sort of even on social media chatter. Is Ben Shelton popping through? Is all of this volume, but no player in the top 5?
Right.
Is that breaking through? I don't know the answer, but I do think it's a different. I think we could have a conversation. Yeah. Would you rather be Norway?
Yeah, that's true.
Or with getting to finals, or would you rather have the depth and the volume that the U.S. has?
Shelton's just a fascinating player to me because, this is all new. Hadn't even left the country, which we've been over. But the fact that he has such a great serve, and we could see it, right? There's so much room to grow. Now, whether he gets to a level is a huge task, and he may very well not, but there is a lot of growth, and the fact that he got this far on a lot of raw tennis and raw athleticism is pretty special.
Short of winning the title, it's kind of the perfect event for him. He goes down to Australia. Had he left the country? I'm not sure about that. No, I'm kidding. That's this has become like Justine Henin in the swimming pool.
Yeah,
like you
Ryan
can't.
Fitzpatrick went to Harvard.
Yeah, I heard that
things.
once.
Yeah.
So no, he leaves the country for the first time. He goes to Australia. He leaves in the top 50. He knows his body can withstand best of 5 tennis. He had all sorts of different wins against different opponents, fellow Americans. He played an Aussie in Australia. But he also knows that there's room to improve on. And you saw there were some lapses against Tommy Paul. I think his service return is an area where he could improve. It's not as though he leaves saying I've got this tennis thing mastered. This is going to be easy. I think he ought to be really happy. He'll get in. He won't have to qualify for events now. He's made some money. we hear a lot about his dad. He is half Indiana, I'll have you know.
Oh, yeah. Brian
he
Shelton.
comes from is on the mother's side from Indiana tennis royalty. So there's work ethic and a measured disposition. But no, I mean, I think he leaves. Yeah. He's got to be thrilled. He's made some money. He's in the top 50. But he also knows, like, there's some levels here I still need to surmount.
He is another example for parents out there. Don't have to specialize sports with your kids. He was a football player, right. and he didn't even want to follow in his dad's footsteps till later, and it panned out. So I'm happy to see what he does. More with Jon Wertheim here on Tennis Channel Inside In, talking Australian Open, the other men's semifinal. Stefanos Tsitsipas, Khachanov. Starting with Tsitsipas. The mental state is always discussed, debated, and intensified. I want to start with some facts, and it's 6 main draws in his career in the Australian Open, and he's made the semis 4 times. Right. So say what you want about Tsitsipas. He's embraced the home slam, so much Greek support. He gets it done in Australia, and he makes deep runs, and the mental state looks pretty fine so far.
Why do you suppose that is? We were talking, the obvious, the Greek crowd in Melbourne is the biggest Greek population outside of Athens. I mean, I think some of it is the courts. I think some of it is just sort of the vibe of Australia seems to suit him. I
think he takes a proper off season too. Like, he's a guy that I think trains and comes in fresh, and he just has found comfort here. I mean, maybe it's just, not so much the home slam, but just the environment, the time and the schedule. He looks good, and the fact that he's able to continue to play good in front was the other thing. I mean, we talk about players that dig deep and come back. Tsitsipas gets a lead and kind of puts it on ice.
He had 1 hour of sort of patchy tennis against Sinner when he was up 2 sets to love, had some opportunities, let Sinner push that to a 5th set. Outside of that, he is cruised. So apart from winning, I mean, I don't know, this is going before the semis, right?
Yeah.
So, apart from winning 5 matches, he hasn't had to invest a lot of emotional capital either. These have been some really crisp, smooth, apart from that 1-5 setter, and even that he was up 2 sets to love. Apart from that, it's been breezy.
Would it be fair in your mind to say, and I don't mean this begrudgingly, he's just a different kind of guy, different cat?
Different cat. Yeah.
So I think that might actually help him in certain sense, that he's bold, that he's got that, swagger, braggadocious behavior, that when it's on, I mean, obviously it can go the other direction, but especially if the task at the end result is playing Novak Djokovic. Like, in your mind, you have to believe that you even have a prayer, and you have to kind of suspend reality. And I think, maybe that might help him a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's a really hard player for us all to gauge. And in some ways, you love the fresh take, and you follow him on social media, and there's no one like him. Good-looking guy, and he's pretty. And then there's some other things, whether it's the insistence on not cutting ties with Pops, or whether it's the Wimbledon outburst, then he sort of has these strange, I don't even want to say lapses, but just they seem out of character from what we know about him. Yeah.
Easily rattled would be another way, because Kyrgios got completely under his skin.
And you also notice, good, seems like a cool guy, good looking guy. He is, those post-match interviews, not comfortable. I mean, we showed one on Tennis Channel, and he's swinging his arms.
Margot Robbie,
sort of that awkward. I mean, I feel Courier handled it quite well, but those courtside interviews, you're like, I can't wait to talk to the artist guy, and then those things go really sideways really fast.
He had a moment last year in his interview. It might not have been with Courier, where he just kind of humbly put down his opponent and talked about how easy it was, and the crowd booed, and he didn't really know what to do.
And then he got upset. Then he clearly was rattled. Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting cat.
I mean, he's playing a semifinal against Khachanov, who he's 5-0 against, so the history is there. But Khachanov quietly, and I say that, I mean, back-to-back hard court semifinals and majors. So finding his game, again, the age thing in tennis, if you come up early, you can have the ups and downs. He's still just 26. He's someone that's, I think, comfortable playing different styles in different environments, and not a villain, but even when the crowd support's not on him, he kind of stays locked in, and we saw that in some of his matches with some of the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, again, another example where he didn't even have to win his quarterfinal outright when Korda retired with that wrist injury. 26. I mean, it seems like this guy came, he arrived and sort of had a man's, he's a man's man. Yeah. He's married, he has a kid, and then you say, wait, 26? That's only a year older than Tommy Paul. I do think Tsitsipas just has more versatility. I do think also sometimes these head-to-head records are a little bit of a red herring, and they're 3-0, and then you say, well, wait a second. They played 5 years ago, and they were all in clay.
It's kind of like Vecich Sabalenka the other night.
Exactly.
5-1,
There was 5-1 to Donna Vekic over Sabalenka, but it was not peak Sabalenka, and a lot of those were different circumstances. But I also think at some point some of those losses have to get in your head.
Yeah.
You beat me 5 times, even if it's different surfaces and different times of the year. That's something I've got to overcome.
I feel like movement is kind of the key in this one, and Tsitsipas being such an athlete, willing to go the distance and grind. And yeah, it's across surfaces. We'll see. I mean, it's all roads leading to Djokovic, but we'll see if these guys have something to say about it. I want to switch our attention to the women's side. We have a final set up at the recording of this one between Rybakina and Sabalenka. 2 different paths to get here. Not the names maybe we were expecting at the onset of the draw, but looking at Rybakina first, and this is where the Wimbledon points are going to come into effect.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't get them. She's up to 10 in the live ranking, would be much higher, but she takes out Iga. She's going through the draw again. Ostapenko's on that list last night against Azarenka. Watching that match, John, I was impressed because she didn't even serve that well, but yet she dominated Azarenka's serve. So there's some versatility in Rybakina's game that I think is starting to seep out.
Toughness, too. I mean, that first set could have gone to Vika very easily, and Rybakina would not lose and then sort of rolled out the second set. Can you imagine a Wimbledon champion and, at minimum, an Australian Open finalist squeaking into the top 10? I mean, one thing I think we see as a legacy of this is that what a dumb decision. You know, we can argue whether Russians should have been banned and whether Wimbledon overstepped, but this business of withholding ranking points, who wins here? I mean, the Australian Open already short for stars banishes her to court 13, which she hasn't been shy about now, sort of rubbing in their face, which, you know, they bury a star player who ends up becoming a finalist. Wimbledon seems like an irrelevant title when the defending champion doesn't get respect. And now we have this player who is 2 sets from winning the title, and she's barely in the top 10. And
you're not just hurting them, right? You're hurting the players that won a couple matches at Wimbledon, didn't get to see the points from that.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Hurting the rest of the draw. They don't want to see Rybakina lower down the rankings early.
Exactly.
She is a cool customer out there, and I feel like, you know, some might say, you know, that it's her demeanor. Like, she doesn't even throw her arms up in the air when she wins these matches, wins these titles. Right. I remember watching her play against Serena. It's Serena's last French Open match ever. Same thing. She beats her.
Yeah, beats Serena and Roland.
And just kind of ho-hum like, this is how it goes.
This was supposed to happen. Did you notice the way her coach was talking to her during the match?
Yeah, it was a little strange.
But I do wonder if there isn't some, and I don't know if this is, I don't know the particulars there. It seemed a little aggressive. I don't know if this is something that they have worked on, but no, even when she won Wimbledon, I mean, you think you're doing cartwheels in the grass, and she sort of, you thought she'd won a Tuesday match in, you know, in Indianola.
I want to give props to Vika for the run to the semis, you know, 10 years since the last one. I think it was 2012 and 2011, I think were the years, 2012, 2013.
10 years ago.
She has been an open book. For better or for worse, she is not afraid to speak her mind, which I love. And she said, look, my tennis was kind of there. It was the mental side. And, you know, has talked about having, you know, the mental breakdowns, mental episodes in the past, but puts it together, keeps herself in tremendous form. And this run was pretty impressive because she is one of these smarter players out there tactically to give herself a better chance to win. So I was thoroughly impressed with Vika's run and putting it all together at this stage in her life.
33 years old. She's a mother. And I mean, I'm interested in her. She's really evolved personally, and she talks very openly. She's very into the mental side. She's honestly, she's very into sort of media interactions and how sort of projecting image and social media versus conventional media. She's really emerged as this kind of wise figure. And that's not, you know, that wasn't a reputation when she won this a decade ago. And she's very open about how she needed to evolve. And, it's really a nice story, and she's still playing high-level tennis. I mean, she was right in there in that semifinal. I mean, I'm sure she's disappointed she didn't quite pull through, but, you know, this is 10 years after her last title to be playing like this is pretty impressive.
I've noticed, too, with her, she's done a great job, you know, moving on from losses, which doesn't sound like much, but she's had some tough defeats, lopsided defeats, big match results, and doesn't go into this funk for months after, which we've seen on both sides of the tour.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That there's really sort of there's intensity, but also kind of a measured, wise approach. Yeah. And no, she's really sort of she's evolved, and it's a nice tennis story.
So the other semifinal was Sabalenka beating Magda Linette, makes that improbable run to the semi. And watching the TC live coverage or the TC coverage, I heard the gem by Paul Anacone where he said, "Look, this match is more likely going to be about what Sabalenka does or doesn't do, or how she plays." And this Aussie Open, I mean, this really run down to Australia where she's, 10-0 on the year, hasn't dropped a set, and has mastered, at least for the time being, because you never know, the double fault issue. I think she's somebody that we always question because the physical gifts are just insane. Like there's nobody that hits the ball like her, no one that matches her size, moves at a decent enough level to combat that. But no, she's done a good job. I think for the serve aspect, John, she's realizing that she doesn't have to go for as much with the rest of her game.
And also, I think Lindsay mentioned this on the show. She has done everything in her power to get to this level. They're biomechanics experts. They're sports psychology. She's had coaching changes. This is not someone who sort of passively have said, oh, shit, my serve's like gone off the rails and maybe I'll get it back, maybe I won't. I also think that, yesterday she's 0-3 in semis at majors, and she plays yesterday against an opponent who, honestly, she's 31 years old. She's never been here before. Overwhelming favorite. That could have been a really brutal loss, as it was. Yeah. Gee, the player expected to win one. I mean, we always talk about all the pressures on the other side of the net, but that's a different kind of pressure than she was used to facing in semifinals with that track record. I give her a lot of credit for pulling through yesterday. And I think she has discovered some cushion, and some of that is not going for quite as much on the serve. I mean, she still blasts the ball. I mean, her forehand speeds are right up there with the dudes. But it seems like there are gears built into her game that maybe weren't always there.
All three semi-losses were brutal losses, too. Like, not that she got outplayed, but just like soul-crushing.
U.S. Open when Raducanu won.
Oh, that was and she's, I love the shout out to her genetics last night in her interview. She just, has to give credit where credit's due. Right. For better or for worse, I always felt like Sabalenka, like she wears her emotions on her sleeve. She is who she is. I mean, there's levels to that, right? Ostapenko's kind of like that and can kind of go off the deep end a little bit too. But I love the fact that she addressed her main weakness. It was her serve, and she didn't try to just power through it and just get through it. She sought outside counsel, and it's helped. And she's someone that's felt like, I think you would agree that in the last couple of years, we're like, this feels like a major champion. Like it would be a shame if she went her career without getting one.
I would never say that I picked her to win, but
okay, all right.
No, I think there's this sense, and I think you're right. A lot of it's how she's responded to these yips. I mean, we've seen this. This has been not just in tennis. We've seen this in other sports. This sort of mental block can be a career killer.
Yeah.
And she sort of had this weird thing where on the one hand, she kind of joked about it and she served underhand. And she's, last year when she was struggling with this, she would roll her eyes and play to the crowd. But then she addressed it. And to get back to what she's doing, I think, 3 double faults, I think, in her last match. I mean, she would have that in a game a year ago.
What was it, like 400 or so last year? It was a record that will probably never be broken.
There were 6 in one game.
Yeah, but she set the record in double faults in a season and was still a top 5 player, which is insane. More with Jon Wertheim. A couple more things here on Tennis Channel Inside In. The players that got to a point and didn't go any further, I do want to mention, Magda Linette, give her props for her run to the semifinal. I hope she can build on it, but we know how tennis works, and we know the track record of it might not get better than this, but I'd love to be proven wrong. So that's where I'm at there.
I think that's pretty good. This might be one of these, surprise semifinalist, or, Do
you think we, we can kind of get into the bigger picture of it, but do you think we need to, I guess, distinguish between threats in majors and threats in some of these non-major events? Because I've noticed the trend that some of the players that have performed well at non-major events, maybe it's the pressure, maybe it's the moment. There was a couple top seeds, like we kind of see, that just seem to get to their level and then peter out.
I think there are a couple things. One, who was I just? Beatrice.
Haddad Maia,
Haddad Maia, who can barely win a match at a major and still has his top 15 ranking.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is what we're going to realize is that we throw around these numbers with the grades. And, hey, Novak's playing in his 44th major semi, and Nadal 900 weeks, and it sounds like, but you don't stop to sort of really pull back and think about that and say, wait, Novak's been to 44 semifinals.
It's like when Federer made 10 straight major finals.
Yeah, exactly, 10 straight major finals. But what we realize is that just pick your name out of a hat. I mean, whether it's Dominic Thiem or Garbiñe Muguruza, that's a normal career. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you lose in the early rounds.
Yeah.
These standards that the big three plus Serena have set, even Andy Murray to some extent, was at least at full health, was sort of this reliable quarterfinalist, semifinalist. That sort of reliability, we're not going to see again. They're the crazy ones. They're the outliers, not how come Zverev is losing in week one.
McEnroe, Agassi, those guys lost first round at majors in what you would call like their career run.
Exactly.
So I think too with like Iga, she loses to Rybakina, and we demand more because we're comparing her to these uncomparable standards of Serena, of these all-time greats. She lost to a tough opponent who played a great match, in round 4.
Right.
The reset's coming. I mean, there might be the pressure of the encore act. 2022 was just a remarkable year. So I'm intrigued to see how she compares to last year's self and if she can handle the expectations of being, compared to that.
Right. And you also don't know how these losses, if Rybakina wins a tournament, that doesn't losing 4-4 in a tight match. Not so bad. I think some losses age better than others. Sebastian Korda had match point in Australia against Novak Djokovic. He wishes he'd closed, but that's a This guy's beating Andrei Rublev like he's a junior or something. So I think also with Iga, I think some of these losses might age better than others.
Do you feel like there was a missed opportunity for some of the players like a Jesse Pegula, a Coco Gauff,
That's
who,
the big one.
I mean, even Garcia was another one who came in with a lot of momentum, but Pegula, it felt like it was a moment, a chance. The draw opened up, and even someone like Pliskova, who made the quarterfinals and doesn't have a major, you never know. There's nothing guaranteed. There was opportunity here that was unfortunately lost.
Right. And, Coco, I would add to that list too. Coco should not be losing Ostapenko in straight sets.
No.
But she's 18. And she'll have plenty more opportunities. I am curious, sort of Jesse Pegula was high road and very gracious in defeat. I wonder if you gave her truth serum, how much this one stings. I mean, she was the highest remaining seed. Everything had sort of opened up for her. She'd beaten Iga already this year. It really...
The fact that there weren't momentum changes in that match was disheartening. Like, if you lose to Vika, okay, Vika's a champion, I get that. But Vika took the fight to her. It was a great strategy. But then that was it. Like, there was no counterpunch.
That second set was not...
With Coco, I just love her game, want her to be, a champion, face of tennis, all that stuff. I want her to work on her forehand. And I know I'm speaking from the clouds here, but it seems like the same things happen in these matches.
Yeah, it's funny though. I mean, sometimes, and even you look at the stat sheet, and looks pretty clean. But then I also think that other players are getting hip to that. I mean, you saw how Ostapenko played strategically.
It was like Iga formula, right? Like Iga in the French Open, it was a master class of how to attack it
apart. Exactly.
And it's I guess a good problem to have in the sense that it takes a top player and they're having a game plan for you. And Coco has been consistent in winning, a couple matches each major, but. Yeah, this was an opportunity for a lot of players, and now it's going to be Sabalenka and Rybakina.
Right.
Rybakina going for her second major. We'd have 2 women having all 4 slams, so it'd be something to kind of think about.
Yeah, right. We'd have two for Iga and 2 for Rybakina. Yeah, very good.
If Sabalenka gets it, I think it could, though, open up the dam of pressures, kind of got the major,
Right. And I think she's playing with that. I mean, I'd say she's probably the best player never to have won a major.
Well, the last thing on the Aussie Open, I just want to make sure that we haven't scared tennis players away from doing media with the Netflix thing, that they're just not going to want to do anything because they all lost early.
I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say they love press conferences.
That's true. And, press conferences are okay.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about that. We hope there is another season. We're eager to see the next 5 episodes. My old man gripe. Not a great look for tennis with all these injuries, right?
No.
So Felix loses. There are 128 players. Not everyone plays to their potential. Like that I get. What I'm a little more concerned about is, Badosa out, Isla out, Nick Kyrgios in surgery, Alcaraz not in the draw. It's the first major of the year, and it's sports, it's physical. Injuries are part of the drill. There's a trainer, there's a whole training staff, but what is tennis not doing right?
Yeah.
If other sports had this kind of an injury problem, where first week of the NBA, half the All-Stars were injured.
Do you think, and I'm glad you brought this up, everyone talks about the season length, how long everything is, and I get it. Brutally long season, injuries, not enough time. On the flip side, I wanted to ask you, players are still taking the exhibitions because of the money. So what if the season got shorter, in theory,
right?
would there be more exhibitions and more play? Like Kyrgios, you said at the beginning of this, took an exhibition match on a bad meniscus.
I saw Kyrgios in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
I don't know if I should say this.
Well, it's out there.
I saw him in Riyadh, and he was basically asked why he was there, and he said the money.
He played doubles with Tsitsipas, so that should tell everybody what that was all about.
No, I mean, in theory, maybe the players get more money out of the big events and the majors and the Master Series, and they don't have to go across oceans in November, December.
I think the injuries are a huge thing. We hope everyone gets healthy, but it's just it's part of the occupational hazard at this point. But I'm excited to see the Aussie Open 2023 season is off and running. Jon Wertheim, thanks for joining Tennis Channel Inside In. You're more than gracious with your time. Always good to see you. My only gripe is next year or whatever your next Hall of Fame is, I want to be there. So I wasn't at the last one. I'm going to try to get there, get on the list next time.
Anyone that does a podcast and gets breaking away in is good in my book.
Right.
No, pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you again.